7 o'clock Jerusalem time. And I just want to say again, if you could all just keep yourself muted. There'll be time for questions later on, and you'll be able to ask your questions or type them into to the chat. This is a VIP, what we call a VIP virtual tour of Jerusalem. And it's hosted by Yahav Zohar, who's up there on the screen, and he'll be with you for the remainder of the time. I just wanted to do a little bit of an introduction. Most of you know me. My name's Fred Schlomka. I'm the managing partner of Green Olive Tours, of the Green Olive Collective, our umbrella organization. I know lots of you who are attending this event, so it's really nice to see all these names that I recognize. I've guided some of you. I've met you, some of you in your homes in Europe and the United States when I've been on speaking tours. And this is our first large webinar type event. And as I said, still very experimental with maps, video, images from Google Earth, and Yahav's narrative throughout. And your experience is going to vary depending on the type of internet connection and the bandwidth that you have and the size of your screen. So I do encourage you to use the largest screen you have available to take advantage of the video and so on that's going to be shown. And I did just want to take a moment to thank all of you for your support you've given us over the years. And to let you know that the working partners here at Green Olive are busy reinventing our organization, thinking out of the box in order to thrive with new opportunities that are opening up in the virtual world. And in a way, it's kind of the upside of this whole coronavirus crisis, that although there's a lot of tragedy going on around the world, people out of work, people dying, people sick, and so on, a lot of us are rethinking our lifestyles, rethinking our work. And so here at Green Olive, we're coming up with new types of products and services that will basically deliver the same type of information to people, except you won't actually have to come to Israel and Palestine to do that. And our latest project, of course, in addition to these virtual tours, is Yahav's new film about Jerusalem. And it's one of the reasons that we gathered everybody here today. We need to raise a few $1,000s to film and edit this new movie about Jerusalem. And that's where you come in. We've already raised almost $1,000. And we thank all of you who have already given for your trust and your generosity. You can see the web address right above me here. You go to that address, it defaults now to our Kickstarter page. You go there on your internet browser. There are some interesting goodies and rewards for those of you who would pledge early. If you go there today, help make this film a reality, then you'll be one of the first to see it, because anyone who pledges, no matter how small your pledge, we will send you a link as soon as the film is ready, and there'll be a special viewing for all the VIPs who have helped us out. So thanks again for joining us here today. And without further ado, I'll hand you over to our head tour guide and partner at Green Olive, Yahav Zohar. Over to you, Yahav.
Hey, thanks, Fred. Thanks everybody for being here. I see many faces that I know and people I haven't seen for a long time and miss, and colleagues and family members. And it's a very strange experience for me, guiding a tour alone in a room into a computer. I think it's strange for all of us, but for me in particular, having strived to avoid offices and screens all my life, and now found myself a tour guide doing this. But there are, somebody's not silenced. We're hearing somebody there. So please, I can't see who it is, but if it's you, if you could please mute yourselves. Because oh, that's Olga. I'm muting Olga. Okay. So yeah, we're all gonna get used to this. But there are advantages to a virtual tour over a physical tour. One of them, I've never had, maybe I have had 93 people on a tour, but it was certainly not fun. This way we can have a lot of people together, and we can do things that we normally could not do with this size of group. Another advantage is I can show you things I might not be able to show you on a tour. Like I can show you where I am. So I live on this small blue quickly warming planet. And you can see, you recognize the Mediterranean Sea and Europe, the Sahara Desert, the Arabian Desert. And if we zoom in, we'll see there's a very narrow strip of green between the Mediterranean and the Arabian Desert, which includes Damascus and Beirut and up to Aleppo and down to Jerusalem. So Jerusalem, for many, many centuries, has been a religious center. For thousands of years, it's been a religious center, usually not a big economic or political or population center, a place of pilgrimage. And it was made a capital by the British, who made it after World War I the capital of British Palestine Mandate, and then by the State of Israel. And Jerusalem really is just at the very edge of the desert. You see, if we go out of Jerusalem just a little bit east, we're in extreme desert. And you can actually see, I'm jumping ahead of myself a little bit, but you can see inequality in Jerusalem from space. You can see West Jerusalem, where I am, the Jewish neighborhoods of West Jerusalem, have a distinctly different color from the Palestinian neighborhoods of East Jerusalem. And that color is green and brown. That color is water. That color is irrigation and gardening. So we have extreme inequality here. We have a precious resource, which is water, which is pumped out of the ground and brought a long way away to Jerusalem. And you can see it's being shared out quite unequally. So on the Jewish neighborhoods, you get much more water than in the Palestinian neighborhoods. Now, zooming in further on Jerusalem, you can see, again, West Jerusalem, Palestinian neighborhoods of East Jerusalem, and this square here is the Old City. Now, normally, we offer a great variety of tours of Jerusalem on Green Olive. You can look on our website, tours of the Old City, tours of East Jerusalem, tours of West Jerusalem, and categories therein. Today, I'm going to try to do a little bit of all those things very quickly, just give you a sort of taste for the things that we can do. Now, usually if you'd come on almost any Green Olive tour, we would meet at the Jerusalem YMCA, which is just a little bit west of the Old City right here. Right here. So yeah, that's another thing we can't do on real tours. We can't go to space, we can't go up in the air, but we could go on top of the YMCA tower, the bell tower of the YMCA, and we could see the King David Hotel, and we could see the Old City, and we could see the Dome of the Rock, and we could see the Mount of Olives. And I might tell you, you know, the King David Hotel and the YMCA are in West Jerusalem, and the Old City and the Mount of Olives are in East Jerusalem, and the border that used to be the Green Line passes right here. And I might tell you, I'm going to take you to see some things in West Jerusalem and some things in the Old City and some things in Palestinian neighborhoods of East Jerusalem. But what I couldn't do on an actual physical tour is take you, as I will now, into the Dome of the Rock. There we are. Didn't have to go through security, didn't have to pretend to be Muslims. here we are inside the Dome of the Rock. And what you see inside the Dome of the Rock is very much an ordinary rock. Just a normal limestone of the hills all around Jerusalem. You see a beautiful dome and structure that is above and around this rock. And the dome is ancient. It's 1,300 years old. But Jerusalem is much more ancient than that. And this rock has been a place of worship for much more than 1,300 years. In fact, just under this rock, is a cave. So if we go into the dome, you see this door. There's a door here, and that leads to steps. And you can go, look at the nice dome decorations. You see this young couple and their child. We can follow them. They're going down the steps. Again, a place where very few of us can normally go. We can go on this tour. And we can see this little cave that is, we can look around. It's this little cave that is right underneath the rock of the Dome of the Rock. And this has been a site of worship for thousands of years, before the Judean temple, a temple which was already ancient when Jesus visited it. So a lot of history, a lot of layers to Jerusalem, but the conflict that we are presently involved in is not ancient. This is just outside the Dome of the Rock. This is a plaza, the Aqsa Plaza, where Muslims come to pray. It's a huge plaza. On some Fridays of Ramadan, when there wasn't this social distancing, 400,000 Muslims fill this plaza together. Exactly the same plaza that is today the Plaza of Aqsa and the Dome of the Rock. It was 2,000 years ago the plaza of the Judean temple, which stood more or less exactly where the Dome of the Rock now is. And that's a source of huge conflict today. But for many centuries it wasn't, because, Jews decided, or for many centuries, Jews would not pray inside this Aqsa Plaza. They would pray just outside it by the Western Wall. Now, that's still the case, but it's beginning to change. I'm going to zoom out again for a moment and say, I told you Jerusalem and Damascus and Beirut and Aleppo used to be all part of one space, Syria, Bilad al-Sham, but it was the British and the French after World War I who made these ruler lines and cut the Middle East up into new parts. And this part, which they called Palestine, they said, here we're going to make a national home for the Jews and help Jews from Europe come and settle here. This very soon met with local resistance, and this is really the beginning of our conflict in the 1920s. You might say the conflict begins right when the British conquer in 1920, but many historians like to begin the conflict to say it begins with the violence of the summer of 1929. So a little bit about that here. Not this, not this. This. So today there is a Western Wall Plaza, but there didn't used to be. So all of this area, which is today the Western Wall Plaza, used to be a Muslim neighborhood. And Jews had only this tiny area to pray in, under many restrictions. And when the British came to rule this country, Jews said to the British, come on, you're promising us a national home, you're encouraging Jewish immigration, give us more rights, more space, more time at the Western Wall. And the British said, we don't touch religious status quo. But they changed every other status quo in this country, empowered Jews all over this country, armed the Jewish police, promised a Jewish state. And therefore, Jews got more empowered all over the country and more frustrated here. And this led in 1929 to a big march of Jews to the wall, demanding more rights, and Muslims coming out to block them. And from there really began the violent conflict. Begins with the connection of the national movements to the religious sites, with the Zionists marching to the Western Wall and Palestinians coming to block them. So if we were doing really a proper Old City tour, I would take you to many more places. I'd take you to see today's great plaza of the Western Wall that is built on the bulldozed away Muslim Moroccan neighborhood, which used to be here. I'd take you maybe to the Jewish quarter to see in the center of the Jewish quarter the golden menorah that the Temple Institute has put here, showing its preparations for rebuilding the temple in place of the mosque, and the rising tensions that are growing around that. But I'm not doing that today. Instead, I want to make this constantly more personal by taking you instead to see my grandmother's house. So this is very near the YMCA, actually, back in West Jerusalem. This porch, you see this porch here on the second floor of this house, in a nice neighborhood, a leafy neighborhood with gardens close to the center of Jerusalem. This is where my grandmother lives since the 1980s in this apartment, and I spent a lot of my childhood here and on this porch and growing up, and I never knew really who built this house. It was only in my 20s when I started to get interested in the politics of our country in different ways. I found out that this was, as I've marked it here, the Tanus house, belonged to the brothers Sleman and Izzat Tanus. Sleman lived downstairs and Izzat lived upstairs, so where my grandparents live. And oh, there he is. Izzat Tanus, who built the house and lived in the apartment where my grandparents now live, was a prominent Palestinian political activist, a member of the Arab Higher Committee, which was petitioning the British against the Jewish state and against the Zionist movement for the protection of the rights of the people already here. And he actually ended up later, as it says here, in New York, representing Palestinians with the UN. So the house that I spent so much time in, the house where these two lovely people live, these are my grandparents. I miss them. I can't go visit them now, they say. There they are. They live in his house. And my grandmother also was born in Jerusalem in 1929. And she's lived through so many, right? The 1929 riots, the 1936 uprising, the 1948 war, the 1956 war, the 1967 war, the 1973 war, the 1982 war, the first intifada, the second intifada. So much violence that has all been about creating and maintaining the Jewish state. And it's a little bit hard for me to tell you. We've entitled this, the movies, Homeland Insecurity. What is Homeland Insecurity? It's many things. It's Palestinians who are being told all the time, this is not Palestine and don't be Palestinians. And it's myself finding out that, at least in the minds of many, many people, my grandmother's house does not belong to my grandmother. And she is squatting the stolen house of somebody else who wants it back, or his heirs want it back. So what we think is the safest place is undermined by the conflict that's constantly bubbling under it. And in West Jerusalem, generally, we don't feel that, right? just between my grandmother's house and the YMCA is this park where I often play with my daughter. It's all very nice. But what I realized is that every morning the people who come to clean this park and to cut the grass and so on are coming from Palestinian neighborhoods of East Jerusalem where they don't have parks. And what I'd like to do really with you guys, since this is a VIP tour, and first of all, I'd like to say that we in Green Olive consider that, I consider that people are important just in general. My grandparents are very important people. Isa Tanus is very important. The people who clean the park are very important. So here we are back at the YMCA. I'm going to show you, let's go back to the YMCA. But now what's going to happen is I'm going to ask you guys to join me. We're going to get in my car. See, there's my car. Don't know how many people we have online right now. 100 or so, right? We can all fit in a Prius if we squeeze in. Put on seat belts, that's important. And we're just gonna go for a drive through Jerusalem. So this is the King David Hotel, of course. And the beginning of our drive is in West Jerusalem. You can see paved roads with markings. You can see sidewalks. You can see trees. Let's say a normal city of the developed world. What we're going to do, though, what I'm going to do is we're going to drive from West Jerusalem into East Jerusalem. So I'm showing you now, I've switched over for a moment to a map. You see the old city here. We were at the YMCA just west of the old city, and now we're going to drive soon across the line into Palestinian neighborhoods of East Jerusalem and towards this red line, which is the wall, the famous separation wall. We're going to take a drive from West Jerusalem through Palestinian neighborhoods of East Jerusalem towards the wall. By the way, I'm not stopping the video, so we're all the time driving. We're passing the old train station in West Jerusalem, which has become cafes and restaurants. But I want to use this time that we're driving to maybe say some more general things, which is, well, let's say this. My grandmother was born in Jerusalem in 1929, the same year they started to build same year they started to build the YMCA, the same year they started to build the King David Hotel, the same year the Israeli-Palestinian conflict began. All of them born in Jerusalem in 1929. And she was born here because her family were Zionists, right? So they very passionately believed that Jews should have a Jewish state so that they are safe and that so they can express their culture and identity publicly and jointly in a way that they couldn't do in other places. And my other grandparents came from elsewhere, but all of them came with the same Zionist drive to make here a Jewish state, to make a safe place for Jews, to make a normal place for Jews. By the way, now we're just at the line. So as we're turning left here, on the left is houses belonging to Jews. And on the right side of the road, like this house, Palestinians, see the black tanks on the roof. That's always a sign of Palestinian neighborhoods because the water service is less good, even the two sides of the road. So people get tanks to get better water pressure in their taps. So we're driving now into a sort of park that is running along what used to be the no man's land between Jewish and Palestinian neighborhoods. So the Zionists wanted to make a Jewish state. And in their mind, very soon it became, to have a Jewish state, you need to have a Jewish majority. So in 1939, after 20 years of Jewish immigration, the British said, maybe that's enough. That's a white paper of 1939. Jews are now 1/3 of the population of this country, up from 10% in 1917. Let's more or less freeze Jewish immigration here and work towards making an independent Palestine in which Jews would be a significant minority, about 1/3. And a big supporter of that plan was Isaac Tanus, whose picture I showed you earlier. But the Zionist movement rejected that. It said, no, we need to have a Jewish majority in the Jewish state. There is no other way. Now, we're driving into Palestinian neighborhoods, into Silwan, and you see people very densely packed. You see this hillside, just no real city planning, or the city planning of the Jerusalem municipality is not to allow Palestinians almost any new building. So they can't build legally, but families grow. And if you leave the city, you can lose your residency. Because Palestinians in Jerusalem don't have citizenship, only residency. And if they leave, they can lose it. So you can't build legally and you can't leave. What people end up doing is building illegally, mostly on top of the existing houses. So we get these very, very dense neighborhoods with insufficient infrastructure, as far as water, as far as electricity, as far as drainage, as far as many of these houses don't really have paved roads leading to them. Only all sorts of dirt paths and steps. They flood in the winter. But this is still not at all the worst situation of Palestinians, even in Jerusalem. So the state of Israel, or the Zionist movement, said, no, we need to have a Jewish state with a Jewish majority. And eventually the UN tried to accommodate that by drawing this very strange map. So the blue would be the Jewish state, the orange would be the Arab state, Jerusalem and Bethlehem would be an international zone, Jaffa would be an island of Arab state inside the Jewish state. Nobody really liked this plan, but Palestinians very much opposed it. They said you can't have this country divided. Isaac Tanus very strongly opposed it. And the British left and we had a war. And in that war, the state of Israel conquered most of what became Israel. Most of what was British Palestine became the state of Israel. And a small area here at the West Bank was conquered by. And then we had another war in 1967, and Israel conquered also the West Bank. So today, all of this is controlled by Israel, but in different ways. So this is officially Israel, and then the West Bank is divided in a very, very complicated way. Right, so we're driving through East Jerusalem, which is a pink, that's officially annexed to Israel. Most of the rest of the West Bank is under military government, and inside that is islands of limited Palestinian autonomy, a little bit like what Native Americans have in North America, reservations. Not exactly, but certainly nothing like a state. And I looked at this, I looked first at this. My first real strong political experience was in my 20s, for the first time, doing something like what we're doing now, driving from West Jerusalem into East Jerusalem, into neighborhoods where I, having lived all my life in Jerusalem, had never been. And just looking physically at what it looked like in the same city, seeing where the people who cleaned my street live. And you see, as we go south and east, infrastructure is deteriorating. And I started to wonder why. Why is all of this happening? This conflict, this oppression, this inequality, these strange divisions of the country into cantons surrounded by walls. And what I came to understand is it's all about needing a Jewish majority in the Jewish state. It's a demographic problem. That's why Isaac Tanus could never be allowed back to his home, together with hundreds of thousands of other Palestinians who fled in the 1948 war, and Israel sealed the borders and said, all your property is confiscated, you can't come back. Why? Because now we have inside this line a Jewish majority and we want to keep it. And then all these policies to encourage Jews from anywhere in the world to come here. And policies to restrict the growth of Palestinian population, which includes, in this area here, a lot of house demolitions. So if Palestinians do try to build outside the built-up areas, demolishing their homes. And then the wall, which is going right through, the wall is going right through Palestinian neighborhoods. So if I were to show you the map for a moment, not the map, but the satellite image, which I've marked painstakingly the course of the wall on. We're driving, this is Palestinian neighborhoods of East Jerusalem, and the wall is going right through them. So some people say it's separation wall, it's probably separating Israelis and Palestinians. No, the wall is separating in Jerusalem Palestinians from Palestinians, separating the Palestinian neighborhoods of East Jerusalem that we're driving through from the Palestinian suburbs of East Jerusalem that we are driving towards but will not be able to reach. And the wall has very, very dramatic effect. It's already on this hillside. We can start seeing the wall. The wall has very dramatic effects on the lives of Palestinians, both sides of it. So Palestinians in the suburbs are cut off from the city, and the city is cut off from its suburbs, which means people can't come in here anymore to go shopping or to use markets or to use services or to work here or to come to mosque here. The city is starved economically and socially by the wall, and the suburbs are. And all of this really to make sure that East Jerusalem cannot become the capital of a future Palestinian state. This is Israeli-style facts on the ground diplomacy. The world says East Jerusalem should become a Palestinian capital. Israel says no. One of the ways of making sure that that no is a no is blocking Palestinians' access, most Palestinians' access to East Jerusalem, separating it physically, socially, economically from the rest of the West Bank in a quite arbitrary way. So when we do eventually arrive at the wall, you'll see it's just passing right through neighborhoods, right through people's lives, interrupting people going to school, going to work, going to hospital. And Palestinians experience really so many different kinds of interruptions like this, of checkpoints, of walls, of restrictions, which are about keeping them in small, dense areas, which are about keeping most of the land free for Jews to settle and build in, which is about keeping the Jewish majority in the Jewish state. And that logic comes from a place of Jewish persecution around the world. So Jews were persecuted, and there was, of course, the Holocaust, and Jews felt that we need a safe place. It comes more than from a logic, it comes from a lot of fear of what happens if we're not the majority. And the huge effort of walls, of separation, of discrimination, of policing and secret policing and surveillance and control, which is all designed to keep Palestinians quiet as we build around them. But really, all of that can be said also to have failed. Because if you look at this whole country, well, here we are arriving at the wall. You see it just pops up there. It's coming up the hill here. And this is called a Sheikh Said checkpoint. And just behind the wall is Sheikh Said neighborhood, which all its people used to go to school, go to clinic, go to work in Jerusalem. They have a deep gorge around them on 3 other sides, so it's difficult for them to go elsewhere. But now the wall is between them and Jerusalem, and everything they do needs permits and needs. So a lot of people's lives are affected in sometimes the most ridiculous ways by this wall. And yeah, I think I have 10 more minutes, right, or so. So all of this is being done to maintain the Jewish state and the Jewish majority. I'll show you maybe a little bit what it looks like beyond the wall, right? So in many cases, beyond the wall, just beyond the wall is actually worse than what we saw here. Because, for example, you see here this enclave in North Jerusalem is legally part of the Jerusalem municipality, but it's left behind the wall. And so the Jerusalem municipality won't go there to collect garbage or service the sewage, or the Israeli police won't go there. And they're living in this very dense, strange no man's land. Oh, any French speakers here? I don't know, I'll silence it. But here we are just beyond the wall, where people are living in a very, very dense situation with very, very little infrastructure and service, with a really failure of garbage collection, of water services, of sewage services, and surrounded by wall on all sides. And again, we say these really extreme and silly conditions, we don't need them. Even inside East Jerusalem, we have all that open space we drove by earlier, which Palestinians own and can't build on. And they're being really forced to build very, very densely here, because here Israel will allow them to beyond the wall, which is all around their neighborhood. And yeah, I'll show you quickly one more thing that's happening just behind the wall. This is also North Jerusalem. This is Ram neighborhood in North Jerusalem, north of East Jerusalem. And this is a bit of activism, Palestinian activism, so non-violent activism. So this neighborhood has been cut off from the city by a wall, which is twisting through it in strange ways and disrupting life. And there was an activist from South Africa who wrote a letter entitled Letter to Palestine, Letter from South Africa. And what they did, these young Palestinian activists, a few years ago, they went and wrote out that letter over about a mile of wall. It's illegal, it's non-violent, and it's trying to show people what's going on and what can be done about it. I know it's dark now because they're graffitiing at night. I'll skip ahead. The point is, we have a set of policies which is about keeping the rule, the majority of one population over another population. And if we look, let's say, at this map of Israel, Palestine, the West Bank, we're very, very close today to 50-50 Jews and Arabs. So the Zionist movement, the historic Zionist movement, has basically failed. Okay, it's 100 years of conflict. We don't have a clear Jewish majority. We do have Palestinians stuffed into these dense islands with walls around them, but that doesn't seem to be, although that's what the Israeli government suggests, is they will call these islands a Palestinian state. That doesn't seem to be a working long-term plan. So we've been asked to show some optimism at the end of this. We want to be optimistic. And I'm going to take you back to the YMCA, where we meet our groups, and tell you the YMCA in Jerusalem is just not any normal YMCA. It is a building that was built purposely to bring together, and you see here Quranic verses on the building and Hebrew biblical verses on the building and many, many Christian elements, a building that was intentionally built to bring together Jews and Arabs in Jerusalem. And it's still running. It opened in 1933 and it's still running. Youth programs and sports programs and the Peace Preschool where Arab and Jewish kids go together. And if we, right, so the angel is hiding his eyes not to see Jerusalem. Yeah, here is a place whose atmosphere is peace, where political and religious jealousies can be forgotten in international unity. So that is the YMCA, which is doing in a very small way what needs to be done, which is to create an atmosphere in which it doesn't matter if you are a Muslim, a Christian, a Jew, where you stop counting, where you stop obsessively counting. How many Jews do we have and where are Palestinians contained? That's what the YMCA is doing. That's also what
we are the Green Olive Collective.
That's also what we're trying to do, right? So we're a joint Israeli-Palestinian collective. This is me with long hair. And there's my daughter. And can you see that? Can you see the picture? Yeah. So in this picture, I don't think you can tell who's Israeli and who's Palestinian. I cannot, only because I know the people. But we're working together to build together a shared narrative of Jerusalem and of this country. One which we hope will be part of a larger building towards a country where laws are not set by people of ethnicity or religion. So my grandparents, very, very sweet people, they are living in a house that used to belong to Palestinians. There's a lot of questions that need to be resolved in how we do this. And there's a lot of ideas out there, which I'm happy to talk to you about how it's done. But the first thing that we are doing in Green Olive, that is being done in the YMCA, that we need to do in Jerusalem, is to stop separating people so obsessively and to stop counting them and stop the demographic games that push people and restrict them. And I think my grandparents would get along great with Palestinian neighbors. I know I do. So again, I have another minute, so I'm just gonna play with you this game again. Which of these children is Jewish, Muslim, Christian? I don't know, except for those of them I happen to personally know. I don't know which one is what. And this vision, this is a preschool where my daughter went, is also the vision of Green Olive Tours, to build something equal and shared, where it doesn't matter who your parents are or who your grandparents are or where you came from. But it's not enough to do it in Green Olive. It's not enough to do it in the YMCA. We need this to become law. We need to work towards changing this country. So as a state, it's not belonging to one or another ethnic group, a religious group. And part of that is building a shared narrative. A shared narrative of our past and a shared narrative of our future. And that is a very small part of, I mean, it's a great task to build an equal and shared society. It is a task that will take more than a generation once legal equality is achieved, right? I think we have a lot of people here from the US online today, that people got civil rights and schools were desegregated doesn't mean that people are equal now. It's just a step in that direction, a step which we have not yet taken, right? So we need first, or to do that, to desegregate our schools, to desegregate our city, to allow people equal political rights, never mind their religion or ethnicity. And then it's going to be an ongoing work and struggle towards a really equal and free society. And part of that, a small part of that, is having a shared narrative that includes both stories, that includes Zionists and Palestinians, that includes Islam and Judaism and Christianity and their shared histories in this country. And Green Olive is trying to be a part of that, of building that narrative, a narrative that is shared also in what it includes and also in who is telling it. So if you come on tours with Green Olive, some of the guides will be with our Israeli, some are Palestinian, you'll stay in Israeli homes and in Palestinian homes. You'll see what we see, what most Israelis and Palestinians don't see, which is how very, very similar we are. And how really sensible it is that we all just get along and stop counting and pushing people. So that's, I think, about it from me. This has been my 45-minute presentation. I hope I've kept to the time, more or less. And I know it's been just little bits of many things. And maybe before I'll end, I'll do a sales pitch. And this is, I am not a salesman, but let me try my best at this. I have in my life been in many political arguments, which none of them, to my knowledge, have ever shifted anybody's opinion, except perhaps to re-entrench themselves in their previous position further. And that's led me to ask, how can you get to people? And one of the ways that I found is a tour, right? To just go on the ground and see physical things and meet physical people is harder to just compartmentalize and deny and do away with. It forces you really to rethink. Now, normally to take a tour of Jerusalem, you would have to be really want to do it, because you'd have to fly over and get a hotel room and spend thousands of dollars to do it. You are the people, many of you have done it. Many of the people on this call are the people who have done it, are the people who are interested, are the people who care. All of you, I suggest, have friends and neighbors and family members who did not do it and who would not do it. You say to them, you want to know about Palestine? Go see it. Say, really? No, I'm not going to go. But this tour that I gave you now is different from the tours, also the virtual tours that we normally give, because in the virtual tours, we don't have your microphones shut off. We have 4 or 5 or 7 people on a tour, and we can talk and you can ask questions and I can show you things and we can move around. So also, of course, if any of you would like to invite to come and bring friends on a virtual tour, a small virtual tour of what specifically you want to see in this country, we will arrange and think of a way to do a tour of every place in this country, even if we have to go and 3D photograph it ourselves. So any tour that you want, but also this is a very nice gift. A virtual tour of Jerusalem is a very nice gift to give to people who might not otherwise do it. And they're anyway sitting at home, and they can join with other people who are their family members or friends or colleagues in their homes around the world. You can offer them. So when we're now going to kick off the Kickstarter campaign, and part of the reward is these online sessions. So you invest in the film, you get an online session. It can be for you, and it can be a gift for whoever you think might want it. It might be useful for, to have this experience, to have this conversation, to see these things. I'm turning this over to Alexander Jones. I'm going to unmute you.
Hi everybody, thank you very much, Yahav. Can you all hear me okay? Looks good, excellent. Well, first of all, let me say thank you very much to Yahav. You can take a drink of water or something, and thank you to all our VIPs who are here with us. I've been designated to be the question master. My usual role is the VP of Administration at Green Olive. And I guess I'll ask a couple of questions that have come through at the same time, make it a bit more efficient for Yahav to answer them. And maybe if Fred or Yahav, as the administrators of this, could unmute people, they might be able to ask the questions themselves. If anybody prefers not to be unmuted, you can always change that on your settings on your screen. The first question actually came in by email before the session. It was asked by Dan Perach, and I believe Dan is in the room. He asked a question about...
Wait, let's do it, wait. Dan.
Dan Perach, do you see Dan there?
I see Dan. I want to unmute him. There he is. Dan, you can speak now.
Yes, I went to the Dome of the Rock when I was 17. I went inside. I didn't know the edict that's not allowed by, for Jews to visit. So, of course, I went in and saw it. And I was just wondering if you could explain more about why it's not allowed for Jews to visit the Dome of the Rock.
Okay. I'll do that very briefly. And I'll say what I believe happened. Okay, the official reason is the rabbis say the temple is such a holy place. In order to go into it, you had to be purified by priests of the temple. We no longer have priests of the temple. We're all impure. So we should stay out until the God sends a Messiah and rebuilds the temple. That's the official Jewish explanation. My understanding is really there's a politics there, which is the rabbi said, let's avoid conflict with Muslims over this. So the Jewish prayer says we pray for the rebuilding of the temple, and the rabbis say that's an abstraction. That's an abstraction. Don't actually go do that. It's a mosque there. It stays a mosque. You pray outside it. You don't need to fight about that. That's, I believe that edict that the rabbis gave hundreds of years ago was exactly to avoid things like the temple movement we have today, threatening to damage the Dome of the Rock, to destroy it in order to build the temple in its place. And really, that's one of many ways that Zionism has moved from many centuries of Jewish tradition, of avoiding conflict, of avoiding war, of getting along, of finding ways to acquiesce, to a new kind of ultra-forceful position of we take what we need. And so, yeah, but originally, to answer your question briefly, the prohibition is because the place is too holy and we don't have priests to purify us before we go in.
Hey, thank you for that answer, Yahav, in this presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
So the next two questions come from the same person, Carol Woodall. Maybe I can answer one of them and Yahav can answer the other. The first question that I can answer from Carol is about virtual tour of Hebron. And I'm happy to say that we are planning virtual tours of many different places, including Hebron. And at the end of this session, we'll send you an email with a very, very short 30-second questionnaire, just asking what you thought of it and asking what future virtual tours you might be interested in. So if you're interested in things like Hebron or any other place, that's a perfect opportunity to let us know. If Carol's happy to be unmuted, maybe you could ask the second question about the film to Yahav directly. If you can find Carol Woodall there, Yahav.
Unmute herself. I can't find her right now, but if she is on the line, you can just unmute yourself. Are you here, Carol?
Oh yeah, I'm here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I took a tour from you a couple of years ago. Yeah. So, no, it was basically in terms of the state of the film. Is it just in editing right now?
No. Actually, we have to say the film is not yet shot, right? So
Okay.
we have a series of films that we're going to make, and there's scripts for them. And we had planned to shoot one in and around Aqsa, but then coronavirus, and the whole place is shut down until later this week. It's going to reopen in a few days. And also just in general, because of the virus and the lockdown, we just were working on the scripts, planning the shooting days, but none of it is even, it's very fast to film once we start because we know everything, but it's not even shot yet.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
Now, my next question that I've curated, I find very interesting, and maybe you will as well, comes from MH. If MH wants to unmute yourself and ask the question about annexation.
Actually, my name is Mutasem Halawani.
Hi,
I
Mutasem.
just used the initials.
Halawani. Are you speaking, where are you, in Washington, D.C.?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so I used to work with the Green Olive Collective. I love you guys. I miss you. You're doing a great job. I just wanted to point this out. Thank you, Yahav, for this great explanation. My question is, I wrote a long question. Let me go over it and read it out. Okay. So my question is, how will, regarding the annexation that might happen, of course, there's different sides to it, like will it gonna happen or not? That's a question, but let's assume it will happen eventually. Like how will the day-to-day life of Palestinians will look like on these annexed parts? And is there a talk about a new category, let's say people are within the borders now that happen to be non-Jews, Palestinians living in the West Bank, but now become part of Israel. What ID will they hold? Is it going to be an East Jerusalemite? It's going to be a citizenship, a new category? What will it be? Thank you.
So I'm going to tell you, I'm going to avoid answering your question because I don't know. And it's an amazing fact that you bring up, Mu'tasim, and I challenge all of you who are following the press, and there's been a lot written in the US and in Israel and elsewhere about annexation, what it will mean. Nobody has talked, as far as I see in pages and pages, I've read a lot of stuff, nobody has talked about what that would mean for the Palestinians in the annexed area. They talked about what it means for the two-state solution, what it means for Israel, what it means for, and this is classic, right? We don't think about Palestinians and their daily life. I can tell you, really nobody knows. I spoke to some people in the Jordan Valley, Palestinians in the Jordan Valley, which is the place that is threatened, or they're very optimistic. I don't know what that's based on. They say when that happens, we'll get residency like people in East Jerusalem. We'll have freedom of movement throughout Israel. So that will be an improvement in our situation. Whether or not that is the case, I don't know to tell you. I don't know. I'll just say for the people who are not from this country, we have a very complex ladder, right? We have, Jews are on top, and then the Palestinian citizens of Israel, and then the Palestinian residents of East Jerusalem, and then those people in the West Bank, but also in the West Bank, people in areas A are better off than people in areas C, and they are better off legally and otherwise than people who are in Gaza. So Palestinians are in all these different legal categories which affect their movement and their access to healthcare and education and political rights. It's a very complicated system where it seems like you're always threatened with demotion, right? If you're bad enough in the West Bank, we'll send you to Gaza. If you're bad enough in East Jerusalem, we'll send you to the West Bank, etc. There's a clear ladder there of and really what will be the situation of, let's say, Jordan Valley Palestinians in the next, it's really not clear to me. It's not been spoken about at all in any official Israeli channel. The Israeli government, the people suggesting this plan on all levels have not referred to it at all as far as I'm aware. what, again, people in the Jordan Valley seem to think is, yeah, they're going to get residency like people in East Jerusalem. I'm not sure what that's based on.
Yeah, I think, I spoke with some Palestinians regarding annexation. And I think the optimistic side, they look at Israel like in the 80s or 90s, where things were much better. And things have changed. I think that's where, like personally, where I see the optimism is based on.
Yeah.
That's the only way I see it. But thank you.
Thanks, Mohammed.
Maybe this is a nice segue for us into a question from Barbara Hawkins, who asked about if Palestinians need, well, I should let Barbara ask the question, I suppose. Is Barbara able to unmute herself? But talking about the different kind of categories and legal status of Palestinians.
I'm here, but I don't have my questions in front of me to ask. If you have them, could you do that for me?
I'd be happy to. Do Palestinians need to go through checkpoints to go to East Jerusalem?
Right. So again, it very much depends which Palestinians, right? Palestinians who are Israeli citizens inside Israel, they move freely through the whole space. Palestinians who are from East Jerusalem, they are on the Israeli side of the wall. To go beyond the wall, they need to go through checkpoints. That's pretty easy for them, relatively, to go to the West Bank and back. The people of Gaza can't come at all, generally speaking. And the people of the West Bank, though, they're the people who can, with the permit, through a checkpoint, come into Jerusalem. And we didn't get to talking at all about the permit system. It's also an amazingly complex system, and there's a very good book about it by Yael Berda, who wrote about how it works. But the official explanation is security, right? We're not allowing you in because you might endanger the state of Israel. But then suddenly for Ramadan, not this year, 50,000 permits to come into Aqsa, for example. So if these people are dangerous all year, how come they're safe on Ramadan? And if they're safe on Ramadan, how come they're dangerous all year? There are checkpoints. There is a system. People are being allowed in limited amounts as a favor to allow them to visit their family members, to go see where they grew up, you apply for a permit and you get it or you don't get it. So yeah, those are people from all around Jerusalem, from Bethlehem, Ramallah, Abu Dis, the West Bank coming into Jerusalem. They need to go through checkpoints in the wall, or they can, as some do, sneak in. That is not so hard to do, to climb or crawl or get around and through the wall. The problem is then you're illegal on this side and policemen can stop you and find you without papers and arrest you. So again, the explanation is this is a security thing. If people really want to get through, they do get through. It's just normal trade, access to healthcare, to education, to visiting family regularly, that the wall is severely interrupts.
Great, thanks, Yahav. It's a couple of minutes past 8. I don't know how many more questions you'd like me to pose you.
Well, look, I have all day. What we said was that we'd have a 45 minutes presentation, which we had, and then up to 45 minutes questions and answers. We only had 20 minutes. So,
excellent. Well, let me go straight into the next couple of questions then.
People, if you're dropping out, that's all right. You've been on our tour, and if you need to go elsewhere and whatever, but I'm going to keep answering questions, and please stay as long as you like.
Brilliant. Well, why don't we have Mike Truman, if you'd like to unmute yourself. There's a couple of minutes of very interesting talk here, I think.
Hi, thanks very much for a very interesting tour. You took us down through Silwan on the
right.
Now, last time, maybe the time before last that I was there was settler movement into Silwan.
Absolutely.
And I just wondered what was happening with that now.
More and more of the same. So Silwan, that's another tour that we offer, by the way, also physically and also virtually, is a Silwan tour. Silwan is the site of most ancient Jerusalem. It is a place in the Jewish tradition that King David ruled from, the place where the Bible was written. And there are many Jews who are upset that that is the Palestinian neighborhood. And there is a strong movement, the City of David organization, which is strongly supported by the Israeli government, working to move Palestinians out of that neighborhood and Jews into it in armored compounds. That is ongoing. It's a very, very stressful situation, one of the most stressful situations in Jerusalem, and that is very much ongoing.
Okay, thank you very much.
Excellent, thank you. Now, I wonder, Yahav, if you saw the HBO series, Our Boys.
I did not. I'm very bad at watching TV. The most time I've spent in front of a screen. And no.
Well, I guess I thought that might be the problem. Maybe I can just answer a quick word about that. There was a question about what what you made of the HBO series Our Boys, which, if anybody doesn't know, deals with the aftermath of the kidnapping, first of 3 Jewish boys, and then kind of in retaliation, a Palestinian boy from East Jerusalem. And I guess, let me just spend 10 seconds on it. I personally enjoyed it as a piece of entertainment. I think it's important to remember it was made for the Israeli audience, first and foremost. And so kind of trying to share light on a world which a lot of Israelis, and particularly Israeli Jews, don't really see. But I think it was more accurate and more sensitive than a lot of similar TV shows, something like Fowler, which has got a lot of press recently comes to mind, which is a bit more kind of sensationalist. But if we move to the next question, let's go for Davor Kunk. I don't know if Davor is here and able to unmute.
Yeah.
Hi, Davor.
I see him.
Yeah, hi. I don't know if you can hear me. So thanks a lot for the tour, and I really enjoyed your tours a couple of years ago in small groups. I think you do it really well. My question is, since you're a mixed group, do you discuss politics among yourself? And if so, did you come up with a solution if you had, let's say, 5 minutes of absolute power in Israel and Palestine? How would you resolve it? Do you have some concrete proposals among yourself, or just keep politics on the side, which is the case among also some other regions? If a Serb, Croat, and Bosniak party together, they decide not to discuss politics, otherwise it wouldn't turn out well.
We can't keep politics on the side because politics is interrupting everything we try to do. Right, so our partners from Bethlehem are not allowed in Jerusalem. We're not legally allowed in Bethlehem. Where do we meet? It's very, very clear that we are together against the current system of discrimination and separation, and that we all together would like to see a more equal and free situation for everybody. Now, within Green Olive Tours, as within, let's say, the left in general, we have people who say we need a 2-state solution. So a Palestinian state controlling its own borders and airspace, not these islands beside an Israel. And we have people who say we need a 1-state solution. And my position on that has always been, yes, either is much better than what we have now. But my personal favorite is something in between. So it's like a federal state where we have open borders, and one area is Palestinian and one area is Israeli, and people can freely move between them, and there's no walls inside or around Jerusalem. But no, we don't have one political program that we're promoting as Green Olive. We have a principle. The principle of equality before the law, the principle of desegregation, the principle of people should have freedom of movement and access to healthcare and access to education and human rights and civil rights. And that can be provided in several ways. I think all of us would really be happy to get behind any of them. If there seemed like right now there was, a political move that was strong enough towards 2 states, we might get behind it. Towards 1 state, we'd get behind it. Towards the federal plan, we'd get behind it. Anything almost to get out of what we have now, out of these islands surrounded by walls and Palestinians not having either their own state or Israeli citizenship.
Could I maybe ask one more quick question?
Yeah.
You showed the wall between, which is separating Palestinians from Palestinians, right?
Yeah.
So is the idea that the part of the wall which is otherwise, let's say, on the Israeli side, would, or the part of the territory would be, let's say, demographically altered to get the Palestinians out and the Israelis in at some point? I presume
it's
the
not
walls.
at some point. It's all the time, right? So as I said, on the side of the wall that we drove in East Jerusalem, there's a lot of open space, but Palestinians are not allowed to build. Why? Because Israel would like them to move across the wall or to anywhere else in the world, but not on the Israeli side of the wall. We want less Palestinians here. The Israeli government wants less Palestinians here, and they're doing that all different ways. That's an ongoing process. It started with a big shove of population in 1948, 750,000 refugees, and continues piecemeal, little bit by little bit, but trying to squeeze out. And the wall is designed with these amazing curves, twisting and turning, and that's demography, to include Jewish settlements and exclude Palestinian ones, and twist this way to get a bigger, stronger Jewish majority on, the, let's say, Israeli side of the war.
Thanks, Double. Hope that answered your questions. Maybe we can move next to Yehudit Yenha. Yehudit is around.
I know Yehudit. Hello, Yehudit. Are you in Germany?
Hey. Yes, and you unmuted me.
I did. I just did it from here.
Thanks. Yes, I am. Warm greetings, and thank you so much. The tour was amazing. I think you've mastered this medium.
No, not at all.
Yes.
We're gonna get better at this. This is practice. You're all friends here, right? It's the VIPs. This was a practice session. There'll be more, and I hope they'll be better. But thanks.
I don't remember what my question was. Sorry, I'll go back, and I hope it's not too Israeli internal discourse. Okay. Right. Actually, I'd like to start from. I asked two questions, so I'll start from the second question. Can you say a few words about why the anti-occupation movement or movements haven't succeeded over the years since 1967? Maybe part of the reason might be that we're doing the wrong work. Could you say something about that? And then I have another follow-up.
Okay. So I think there's many things we could say about when we talk about the anti-occupation movement. We're talking about many different things because there is Palestinians. The Palestinian national movement might be described as an anti-occupation movement, right? I think usually when people say anti-occupation movement, they're referring to Israeli citizens. Now, Israeli citizens against the occupation are pretty much always going to be a minority because the occupation in many ways benefits Israeli citizens. They profit from it. So there's not going to be a mass movement against it. I think a big problem of the Israeli anti-occupation movement is that it usually only addresses what was conquered in 1967 and doesn't talk about my grandmother's house and Jaffa and Haifa and the 78% of the country that was conquered and depopulated in 1948. And that's maybe part of the reason why the Israeli anti-occupation movement doesn't really have a Palestinian partner, right? So to have an anti-occupation movement of Israeli citizens is like having a civil rights movement of whites. It doesn't make sense, right? If you're really fighting for Palestinian rights, then fight with them. A lot of what's been gone in Israel under the name of anti-occupation movement has been just another version of the racist idea of keeping the Jewish majority in the Jewish state by drawing a line and saying Palestinians are there and here we have our Jewish state, and Palestinians are not going to join along for that. And Israelis are not going to en masse join along for that. So there you are stuck. Unless you have a joint movement that's Israeli-Palestinian, unless you address 48 as well as 67, even to say that you have a movement, I think, is an exaggeration, because to have a movement, you need some direction and energy. A movement is direction and energy, and lacking both those things, you're not going to get very far.
That was a better answer than I could have ever hoped for. Thank you. Follow up, which movements, I like your description, maybe today, do you find relevant in this moment, standing in front of this question of annexation, and maybe also how can annexation debate or discourse not become what the occupation discourse has been already for so long? Like, how can we start hitting the point?
Look, so I'm not sure who is the we, but I'll say in Israel, there seems to be a pretty broad consensus around annexation, right? So Netanyahu is for annexation, and the Gantz, who just joined his government, is for annexation too, basically. There's no serious opposition to that inside Israel. And so if annexation will or won't happen depends a lot on international diplomacy. So the Trump administration is behind annexation, but the Biden administration would not be behind annexation. The EU is not taking a strong stand, but it could take a strong stand. Things like that. And they're like citizens of Western democracies have a role to play in advocating with their governments to take stronger or clearer stands on these issues. I don't see right now the movement within Israel or Palestine that's gonna, from within, towards this effort.
Okay, then I just say thank you, and we're doing our best.
Thanks, Judith. Good to see you.
Thanks, Judith. Can we move now to Ismay Vasat? I don't know if you can hear us. Yeah, hi, Ismay.
Hi, thank you for this evening. I've really enjoyed it. My question was what you think of the use of the settler colonialism paradigm to describe Israeli nation-state building, and what you think this means for Palestinian people's voice and history because of the focus on the settler in this paradigm.
Okay. I'm not sure I followed all of that, especially the last sentence, but I'll go back to the beginning where I did understand, and then you can clarify again. Look, I'll often make that comparison, like just to, right, no two historical cases are ever the same, right? What happened to the native people of America is different from what happened to the native people of Australia. Yeah. They both fit into one paradigm. What happened to the Arabs of Palestine is very different again from what happened to those people because of a great many differences in circumstances. There is that similar element, which is Europeans, and always you notice it's the weakest groups of European society who are being sent overseas to settle the parts of the world that Europe conquered. If it's the religiously persecuted to America and the convicts to Australia and the Jews to Palestine, there is a pattern there. There are many differences. So what I think about that is that historical comparisons have a very limited usefulness. And you can get into them and you can discuss, is what we have in the West Bank apartheid? Okay, there's been books written about this. It is apartheid. It isn't apartheid. Apartheid in South Africa is one thing. The military government of the West Bank is a different thing. There are similarities. There are differences, right? So I'm not an academic, happily, or a theoretician. So I don't have to so much decide which paradigm this fits into. Just say, let's go from where we are, systemic inequality based on ethnic and religion, away from it, towards a situation. You could present that as decolonization. There's a very interesting organization decolonizer, doing that. Worth looking at their projects and their maps and their things. It's the real answer, Esme. The real answer, I don't really care so much if this is or isn't settler colonialism, if there is or isn't apartheid, if this is or isn't whatever name you want to call it that's going to generalize it and fit it into a paradigm. This is a country in which systemic inequality based on ethnic and religious criteria is all over, and where it shouldn't be. And I think we should work to change that. I think it can be useful to get into comparisons, but also you can get really bogged down in these paradigms and in these questions, which become academic.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Do you want to explain the second part of the question there, or did that kind of cover it for you already?
I think the answer covers it for me. Thank you.
Great. So I guess next off would be Clemencia Rodriguez. Can you unmute yourself? Hi, Clemencia.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot for a very, very informative and beautiful tour. I mean, the beauty of some of the sites is amazing. I was in Bethlehem last year, and at the Banksy Museum, there's an exhibit that has the water pipes that go into Palestinian homes and the water pipes that go into Israeli homes. And to me, it was so puzzling how in the same city and sometimes in neighborhoods that are very close together, there's two water systems. And doesn't that just rise the cost of water distribution exponentially? Can you explain what you know a little bit about the water distribution system?
Okay, so again, the water distribution system, there's a question of where, because things happen differently in different categories, in different areas. In East Jerusalem, in theory, I mean, Palestinians are connected to the same water system as Israelis, except the infrastructure in the Palestinian neighborhoods, like the road infrastructure that we saw, is very old and poor. So the pipes are narrow pipes with low pressure, and there's a lot of unpermitted buildings, so you have 5 or 6 apartments hooked up to what was supposed to be the hookup for one house, and so you get even further problems with water pressure and water supply. And people get overcharged for water because they're on the clock for one apartment using water for 6 apartments, so they get a higher rate. But in Jerusalem, in theory, people have access to the same water. Just the infrastructure that's serving into their homes is different. And when they build a settlement into a Palestinian neighborhood, they'll build big tanks and big pumps, so they don't feel the neighborhood system that they're connected to. And when they build a whole new Jewish neighborhood, they build for it new water infrastructure. That's different again to people. The dramatic situation is in the West Bank beyond the fence, where really the Israeli settlements are connected through the Israeli water company, and the Palestinian communities are connected through the Palestinian water company. And the Palestinian water company also gets all its water from the Israeli water company. But it has to go first to the Palestinian water company, then to Palestinian homes. And the way that's shared is very, very, very unequal. So many neighborhoods in the West Bank, especially in the summer, they're getting running water a few hours a week and they fill up tanks. Meanwhile, the settlements just across the road have lawns and palm trees. That is really an extreme situation, much more than inside Jerusalem, where it's just a question of infrastructure.
Thank you very much, Yahav. That was great. Maybe next we can have Barbara Hawkins, who asks about a book.
Yes, okay, thank you very much. There was a recent book in February, it was just published. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, Apiron. And it's about 2 fathers, Rami, Ilan, and Bassam. I can't pronounce, Armini?
Aramin.
Okay, good. So you know who they are. And So I'm wondering, they seem to have a grassroots effort going on there and are successful in reaching out in the United States because it's on the big readers list for all the readers groups. But I'm wondering how their efforts are changing things within the country. And I also wonder about trust, because it seemed in the book that there was mistrust amongst their own populations. They were suspicious when Rami was meeting with Bassam, and how are you going to have success if you try to convince the other side, but at the same time, you can't even convince your own people.
Right. Yeah, we had on this call also my colleague Itamar, but I think he's had to leave. And that's too bad, because Itamar is really, together with Rami and Bassam, one of the founders of Combatants for Peace. He's also a guide with Green Olive Tours as Itamar. And I know Rami and Bassam casually, but Itamar knows them very well. And was also with them founding the movement of Combatants for Peace. I can tell you, it's very difficult. Inside Israel, like the people who founded Combatants for Peace, and I know quite a few of them, they were Israeli heroes. They were Israeli fighter pilots and commandos and this and this and that. And they had in their mind, when they sort of started out in 2006, when they were going public, when we, the fighter pilots and the heroes, when we come out publicly and we say this situation has to change and this is all not for our security and we need to change it fundamentally, that's going to shock the whole system. But the Israeli and Zionist movement are much stronger than that. And they have a huge gift for, or used to have, but still, for marginalizing without silencing. So saying, oh, that's so interesting what you deluded, naive people are saying. Your combat experience must have put a lot of stress on you, or losing your children must have put a lot of stress on you. So what happens is, it's very, very hard to get to Israelis. That's something I've been struggling with for years. I think those people who do get to meet Bassam, those Israelis who do get to meet Bassam personally, have to change something in their minds. He is, to my mind, a great communicator. And he's a person who gets up there and says, I was in prison and I lost my daughter and I'm standing here telling you, and it's very hard to push back against that. The question is, how do Israelis get to see Bassam? Because schools won't have Combatants for Peace talk, and public venues get shut down for allowing them to appear. There's a lot of stuff done to silence that. I have to say, thank you, coronavirus. There is, every year, there is the joint memorial ceremony, which Combatants for Peace organize and Rami and Bassam participate in, which is on the Israeli Memorial Day, Israelis and Palestinians together, remembering their loved ones and saying, we need to end this. And that's an event that has been growing over there. It started with a few dozen people, grew to a few hundred people. Then they got a bigger hall, had a few thousand people. The last event was held 2 or 3 weeks ago over Zoom, or not Zoom, over Facebook Live or whatever it was. And I think they said they had 200,000 viewers. Because suddenly everybody can come. I don't know how many of those people were Israelis and how many of them were around the world. But I think that book, which I have yet to read, although I did give a tour to the author before he wrote the book, but I didn't get to read the book yet. I'm sure is great because they're great characters, Bassam and Rami. And I'm sure that reading it is going to change people's hearts and minds who read this novel. And I was sorry to see that the Israeli publisher decided, who usually publishes Column Economics books in Hebrew, decided not to publish it in Hebrew. So that's a book from an international writer about this country that is not getting published in this country in Hebrew. because it's something that the publisher knows Israelis just don't want to hear and don't want to see and don't want to touch. And that's a struggle that I've been trying to confront different ways, and I still haven't found the best way. It really is very hard to talk to Israelis about these issues. They'll do a lot of things rather than talk about this. Change the subject to any manner of things. I think we should finish. I don't know, Alex, if you want to choose a last question. But
well, I think we have covered all the questions, and I think we're out of time. So I thank everybody for asking questions who did. Maybe one quick last reminder about the Kickstarter page, which you can see above Fred's head, JerusalemRevealed.com. I've just checked that it's only been active for an hour or so, and we've already raised $600 just while this tour is happening. So it's a great start, and thank you very much to all our VIPs who've already contributed. And I guess I'll leave our final words to you, Yahav. Thanks again.
Yeah. So thank you all for being here. It's been great to see you. I hope to see you again soon in the real world, and maybe even before that again in forums like this. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay. Good night, everybody. Thanks for coming. Or good morning, it is some places, I guess.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, we're going to close it out.
Thanks, everybody. Bye, all.